My name is Addison Eidinger. I'm 33 years old, and my wedding day started with silence. The kind of silence that screams, something is wrong. The house where I grew up, where I had spent my last night before my big day, was empty. No sound from my mom, Grace, no trace of my dad, Thomas, just nothing from my sister, Chloe. Only a single envelope on the kitchen table, and inside, words that cut deeper than any knife could. They'd taken off to Europe with my wedding fund, leaving me alone at the altar. What none of them knew was exactly who I was marrying. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know what city you're from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my wedding day nightmare turned into something my family could never have imagined. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Boston with my mom, Grace, my dad, Thomas, and my younger sister, Chloe. We were never rich, but we were comfortable enough. Dad worked as a high school math teacher during the day and drove for a rideshare company on weekends. Mom was a nurse at the local hospital, often taking night shifts for the better pay. From the outside, Chloe and I seemed close. We shared a bedroom until I was 16, whispered secrets after lights out, and defended each other at school. But beneath that sisterly bond ran an undercurrent of competition that grew stronger as we got older. I was always the studious one, the responsible eldest daughter who followed rules and brought home straight A's. Not because I was naturally smarter, but because I studied until my eyes burned. I knew education was my ticket to a better life, and I took it seriously. Addison's going places, my parents would say, not realizing how those words stung Chloe, who struggled more with academics. Chloe was beautiful, social, and charming. Where I was reserved, she was vibrant. Where I planned, she lived in the moment. But somewhere along the way, her natural confidence twisted into resentment. Every achievement of mine became something she had to match or outdo. When I got accepted to college with a partial scholarship, Chloe decided she needed to go to a more expensive school. When I landed my first apartment, she found one in a trendier neighborhood she could barely afford. It was exhausting, this constant one-upmanship, but I tried to rise above it. She was my sister, after all. After college, I landed a job as an assistant curator at a small art gallery in Boston. The pay was modest, but I loved being surrounded by beautiful creations and interesting people. I lived within my means in a cozy one-bedroom apartment decorated with secondhand furniture I'd lovingly restored myself. I was proud of what I'd accomplished on my own merit. Then came the night that changed everything. Our gallery was hosting a fundraiser for local artists. I was running around making sure everything was perfect when I literally bumped into Gannon. He was examining a contemporary sculpture with such intensity that he didn't see me approaching with a tray of champagne flutes. Thankfully, none spilled on his simple but clearly well-made suit. "I'm so sorry," I apologized, mortified at my clumsiness. He smiled, and something inside me shifted. "No harm done, though I should probably stick around and keep an eye on you, just in case you're a danger to the art." His eyes crinkled when he teased, and I found myself laughing. I assumed he was just another attendee, perhaps a collector or art enthusiast. We spent the rest of the evening talking about everything from Renaissance masters to street art. Not once did he mention his family business or background. He asked about my role at the gallery with genuine interest, listened to my opinions on the exhibits, and treated me like my thoughts mattered. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night, and I tried not to check my phone too eagerly the next day. When he called to ask me to dinner, I said yes immediately. 6 months into dating Gannon, I finally learned the truth. We were having dinner at my apartment. I'd cooked pasta because it was affordable, and we were drinking $2 wine from actual glasses instead of the plastic cups I usually used. Gannon seemed nervous, fidgeting with his fork before finally speaking. "Addison, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice serious enough to make my stomach drop. "I haven't been completely honest about my background." My mind raced to the worst possibilities. Was he married? A criminal? Instead, he revealed he was Gannon Black, son of William Black, CEO of Black International Properties, one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the world. "You're a millionaire," I gasped, trying to process this information. "You are, my family is wealthy, yes," he admitted, "but I wanted to find someone who would love me for myself, not my bank account. That's why I never mentioned it. I hope you understand." I was stunned, but also touched by his vulnerability. Gannon explained he'd watched previous relationships crumble once women discovered his wealth. They'd change around him, become less authentic, more calculating. He wanted something real, and he thought he'd found it with me. "Is this why you never invited me to your place?" I asked, thinking of all the times we'd hung out at my small apartment. He nodded. "I live in my family's building downtown. I was afraid it would change things between us." I appreciated his honesty, even if I was a little hurt he never trusted me sooner. But I understood his caution. In the months that followed, I got glimpses of Gannon's wealthy lifestyle, but I insisted we continue our regular dates at neighborhood restaurants and weekend hikes. I wanted Gannon to know I valued him, not his money. And secretly, I wasn't ready to fully step into his world yet. It felt too foreign, too intimidating. I never told my family about Gannon's background, partly because I was respecting his privacy, but also because I knew how Chloe would react. She'd already made snarky comments about me dating someone I met at the gallery, assuming he was some starving artist or pretentious art snob. If she knew the truth, she'd either try to use me for access to his world or resent me even more. Neither option seemed appealing, so I kept Gannon's wealth our secret, not realizing how that decision would ultimately set the stage for the most dramatic day of my life. After a year together, Gannon surprised me with a weekend trip to Cape Cod. He said we needed a break from the city, and I was more than happy to spend a few days by the ocean. We stayed at a quaint bed and breakfast, walked on the beach, and enjoyed seafood at local restaurants. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until our last evening there. Gannon suggested a sunset walk along the shore. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and pinks as we strolled hand in hand. When we reached a secluded spot near a lighthouse, he turned to face me. "Addison, this past year has been the most honest and real relationship I've ever had," he said, his voice catching slightly. "You see me for who I am, not what I have. You challenge me, make me laugh, and make me want to be better." Before I could respond, he was down on one knee, sand sticking to his jeans, pulling out a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a beautiful but modest diamond ring that caught the last rays of sunlight. "I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred my vision as I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. Later, he told me he'd chosen a smaller stone intentionally, knowing I'd be uncomfortable with anything flashy. It was just one more example of how well he understood me. We decided to wait until we returned to Boston to share the news with our families. I called my parents the moment we got back, and they were ecstatic. Mom immediately began talking about venue options and dates, while Dad got emotional about his firstborn getting married. When I told them we wanted a simple ceremony, they seemed relieved, probably thinking about the financial implications. Telling Chloe was different. I invited her to lunch, excited to share my happiness with my sister. When I showed her the ring, she examined it closely. "It's cute," she said finally. "Kind of small, but dainty." "So when do I get to meet this mystery man you've been hiding?" "Soon, I promised. And Chloe, I was hoping you'd be my maid of honor." Her face lit up at that, and for a moment I saw the sister I'd grown up with, the one before competition and resentment had crept in. "Really? Of course I will." The initial wedding planning started smoothly. I wanted a small ceremony at a local garden, followed by a reception at a neighborhood restaurant we both loved. Nothing extravagant, just meaningful. Gannon suggested several times that we could have a bigger wedding if I wanted. "My parents would be happy to help. They're excited to meet your family." But I insisted on keeping things simple. I want our wedding to reflect who we are, not turn into some society event. Gannon respected my wishes, though I sometimes caught a look of concern on his face when I talked about budget constraints. What I didn't know then was that he worried I was limiting myself unnecessarily. As the wedding drew closer, Chloe's behavior became increasingly strange. What started as casual questions about Gannon and his family grew more pointed. "What did you say his last name was again? And his family's from where exactly?" I'd reply, "He works in real estate development," not elaborating that his family owned properties worldwide. At our first dress shopping appointment, Chloe pushed me toward gowns way above my budget. "Come on, Addison, you only get married once. Surely Gannon can afford something better than these off-the-rack options." I insisted, "These are beautiful dresses, and we're paying for this wedding ourselves." She rolled her eyes. "So practical, always settling for less." That comment stung, but I brushed it off. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Whenever Gannon's name came up, she'd get this calculating look in her eyes. She volunteered to help with vendor research, but would always come back with options way beyond what we'd discussed spending. About 3 months before the wedding, Gannon's parents insisted on meeting mine. I was nervous about worlds colliding, but agreed it was time. We arranged dinner at a nice but not overly expensive restaurant. I warned Gannon's parents, William and Susan Black, about my family's unawareness of their wealth and status. "We just want to meet the people who raised such a wonderful woman," Susan assured me, squeezing my hand warmly. The dinner went surprisingly well. William was charming and down to earth, asking my father about his teaching and sharing stories of his own early career struggles. Susan and my mother bonded over their shared love of gardening. Not once did they mention their extensive property holdings or jet-setting lifestyle. I caught Gannon's eye across the table and felt a rush of gratitude for his incredible family. Chloe, however, was oddly quiet throughout dinner, observing everyone with narrow eyes. Afterwards, she bombarded me with questions. "His parents seem weirdly polished for people in standard real estate. And did you see his mother's watch? That was a Cartier." I deflected as best I could. "They've done well for themselves. Can we focus on the wedding now?" Looking back, I realized Chloe was piecing things together, growing suspicious about Gannon's background. But at the time, I was too busy with wedding preparations to pay much attention. That was my mistake. Over the next months, small incidents began adding up. Chloe would schedule cake tastings, then cancel last minute without telling me. She lost the samples for the invitations twice. When I asked her about bridesmaid dress shopping, she always had an excuse for why she couldn't make it. "Are you sure you want Chloe as your maid of honor?" Gannon asked gently, after she missed our final venue walkthrough. "She doesn't seem very reliable lately." "She's my sister," I said firmly. "She'll come through when it matters." But deep down, I was starting to worry. My parents, too, had been acting strange, having whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I attributed it to wedding stress and financial concerns, never imagining what was really happening behind my back. The final week before our wedding arrived with a flurry of last-minute details and mounting anxiety. Our venue was a charming garden with a small reception area that could accommodate our 60 guests. I'd chosen wildflowers for my bouquet and simple centerpieces that I planned to arrange myself the day before the ceremony. Everything was modest but meaningful, exactly as I'd envisioned. Except Chloe was nowhere to be found. "She said something about an emergency at work," Mom explained when I asked why my sister had missed the final fitting for her maid of honor dress. "I'm sure she'll pick it up tomorrow." But tomorrow came and went with no sign of Chloe. 3 days before the wedding, I discovered she'd never confirmed the musician we'd hired, never ordered the guest book I'd selected, and completely forgotten to pick up the table numbers from the calligrapher. Panic rising, I called her cell repeatedly, only to be sent straight to voicemail. When I finally reached her, her voice sounded distant, almost cold. "Sorry, been super busy. Can't Mom handle those things? Chloe, you're my maid of honor. These were your responsibilities, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing frustration. Well, maybe you should have hired a wedding planner instead of being so budget conscious, she replied before making an excuse to hang up. I was hurt and confused by her behavior, but there was no time to dwell on it. Thankfully, Gannon's mother, Susan, stepped in discreetly to help. "Let me take care of the loose ends, dear," she offered when she found me crying over the guest book situation. "You focus on being a beautiful bride." I was touched by her kindness. Over the past months, Susan had become the supportive maternal figure I'd always craved. Where my own mother was practical to a fault, Susan was nurturing and emotionally present. She never pushed or judged, just offered gentle guidance when asked. "I don't understand why Chloe's acting this way," I confessed to Susan as she helped me track down the missing items. "She's always been competitive, but this feels different, almost like she wants my wedding to fail." Susan squeezed my hand. "Family dynamics can be complicated, especially around significant life events. Try not to let it dim your joy." The day of our rehearsal dinner arrived, a simple affair at a local Italian restaurant. Friends and family gathered, but one seat remained conspicuously empty. Chloe had texted an hour before, claiming a work emergency had come up. "On a Friday night?" Gannon questioned skeptically. My parents exchanged worried glances but quickly changed the subject when they noticed me watching. Their behavior was becoming increasingly suspicious. Dad checked his phone constantly, and Mom seemed unable to meet my eyes for more than a few seconds. "Is everything okay with you two?" I asked directly when we had a moment alone. "Of course, sweetheart. Just wedding jitters. You know how emotional this all is." I tried to believe her, but something felt off. Gannon's parents more than made up for my family's strange behavior, though. William gave a heartfelt toast that brought tears to my eyes, welcoming me to their family with such genuine warmth that for a moment I forgot about Chloe's absence. After dinner, back at my childhood home where I'd spent my last night as a single woman, I tried Chloe's phone again. To my surprise, she answered. "Finally," I sighed with relief. "Where were you tonight?" "Something came up," she said vaguely. Her voice sounded strange, almost cold. "Listen, Chloe, about tomorrow. Please tell me you'll be there. I need my sister with me." "Yeah, about that." She paused. "Just remember that everything happens for a reason, okay?" "What does that mean, Chloe? You're scaring me." "Nothing. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." With that cryptic statement, she hung up. I sat on my childhood bed, confusion and anxiety battling inside me. Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't piece it together. I considered calling Gannon, but decided against it. He was staying with his best man, and I didn't want to worry him with family drama. When my parents came home from the rehearsal dinner, I heard them whispering in the hallway. "We can't back out now," my dad said, his voice tense. "But what about Addison? This will break her heart," my mom replied. "She'll understand eventually. Chloe made some good points." I froze, straining to hear more, but they moved to their bedroom, closing the door firmly behind them. What did Chloe say to them? What was arranged? My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning as anxiety gnawed at me. My last thought before finally drifting off was that, regardless of what drama Chloe might cause tomorrow, I would marry the man I loved. Nothing else mattered. I had no idea how wrong I was. I woke on my wedding day to sunlight streaming through my childhood bedroom window. For a moment, I felt nothing but excitement. Today, I would become Addison Black. Today would be the beginning of my new life with Gannon. Then I noticed the silence. No coffee brewing, no morning news playing on the kitchen television, no sounds of movement from my parents' room. Just complete, unsettling stillness. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, patting down the hallway in my pajamas. No answer. The bathroom was empty, towels neatly hung. My parents' bedroom door stood open, their bed already made with precision. Something was very wrong. My parents never left the house before 7 on weekends, and it was barely 6:30. Heart pounding, I rushed downstairs, calling their names with increasing panic. The kitchen was spotless, no sign of breakfast preparations. On the center of the table sat a single cream-colored envelope, with my name written in Chloe's flowing script. With trembling hands, I tore it open and began to read. Dear Addison, by the time you read this, Mom, Dad, and I will be on a plane to Paris. Yes, Paris. The trip they've always dreamed of but never could afford because they were too busy funding your college education and now your wedding to some nobody. I finally helped them see they deserve better than wasting their retirement savings on your mediocre wedding to a man they barely know. The money they set aside for today is being put to much better use, giving them experiences they actually deserve after all their years of hard work. Let's be honest, your wedding was going to be embarrassingly cheap anyway. The garden venue, homemade centerpieces. You've always settled for less and called it being practical. Maybe if you'd aimed higher or found someone with actual prospects, things would be different. Don't try calling us. Our phones will be off until we land. And honestly, what would you say? That we should have sacrificed more for you? Haven't we all done enough of that already? If you're still determined to get married today, I'm sure you can find some courthouse that's open on Saturday. That seems more your style anyway. Bon voyage. Chloe. The letter slipped from my fingers to the floor as I collapsed into a kitchen chair. This couldn't be real. My family wouldn't abandon me on my wedding day. My sister wouldn't be this cruel. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and called my mother. Straight to voicemail. My father's phone, the same. Chloe's number didn't even ring, just an automated message saying the caller was unavailable. In desperation, I opened Instagram. The most recent post on my mother's rarely used account was a selfie of the three of them at Logan International Airport, captioned, "Surprise adventure begins now. Paris, family trip." The timestamp was from 5 hours ago, around 1 in the morning. They'd left while I was sleeping, not even saying goodbye. Tears blurred my vision as the reality sank in. My wedding was in 8 hours, and my entire family had abandoned me. No father to walk me down the aisle, no mother to help me with my dress, no sister to stand beside me. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my shocked stupor. I opened it to find Gannon, concern etched across his face. "Hey, I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, but you weren't answering texts, and I got worried," he said before registering my tear-stained face. "Addison, what's wrong? What happened?" Wordlessly, I handed him Chloe's letter. His expression changed as he read, transforming from confusion to disbelief to cold anger. "They left you," he said quietly, "on our wedding day." His voice was quiet but intense. I'd never seen Gannon truly angry before, and despite my distress, I noted how his entire demeanor changed. This was a glimpse of the powerful businessman he could be when necessary. "They took the money we were going to use for the reception," I whispered. "We need to cancel everything. Call the vendors, the guests." My voice broke as the enormity of the situation hit me fully. Gannon pulled me into his arms, holding me tight as I sobbed against his chest. After a few minutes, he gently tilted my chin up to meet his gaze. "Listen to me, Addison. We're getting married today. Not at a courthouse, but with the beautiful ceremony you deserve. I'll handle everything." "But how? We can't afford—" "Let me worry about that," he interrupted firmly. "Do you trust me?" I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to argue. Gannon immediately made several calls, speaking rapidly and with an authority I'd rarely heard him use. The first was to his mother, explaining the situation in brief, clipped sentences. Next came calls to what sounded like business associates, with references to contracts and immediate wire transfers.
Within 30 minutes, our small apartment was transformed into command central. Susan arrived first, sweeping in with her characteristic grace and immediately wrapping me in a warm embrace. My dear girl, what a terrible shock. But we'll fix this, I promise you. Behind her came a tall, elegant woman who introduced herself as Natalie, apparently one of Boston's most exclusive wedding planners who typically booked 2 years in advance. The Blacks are valued clients, she explained smoothly when I expressed surprise at her immediate availability. We'll make this work.
Gannon took my hands in his. Addison, I know you wanted a simple wedding, and I've respected that. But circumstances have changed. Will you let me give you the day you deserve? No limitations, no compromises based on budget, just a beautiful celebration of our love with people who actually care about us. Fresh tears welled in my eyes, but these were different from the devastated sobs of earlier. These were tears of gratitude, of being truly seen and valued. Yes, I whispered, let's get married today. With that single word, everything shifted into high gear. Susan led me upstairs to shower and dress in comfortable clothes, promising we'd address the wedding dress situation shortly. As I numbly followed her instructions, I heard the house filling with more people, assistants, coordinators, vendors being redirected. When I came back downstairs, Gannon sat me down at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd found Chloe's cruel letter just hours before. Addison, there's something I need to tell you, he said, his expression serious. You know my family is wealthy, but I've never been fully transparent about the extent of it. Over the next 15 minutes, Gannon revealed the true scope of the Black Empire. Not just luxury hotels, but a vast international conglomerate with interest in real estate development, technology, investments, and media holdings. His family wasn't just wealthy. They were billionaires with homes in 7 countries and connections to some of the most influential people in the world. The reason I'm telling you this now is because you're about to see a different side of my life. He explained gently. People are going to move mountains today because of my family name. I didn't want that to define our relationship, which is why I've kept it low-key. But right now, I'm using every resource at my disposal to make today special for you. I sat in stunned silence, processing this information. Are you upset? He asked, a flash of vulnerability crossing his face. No, I said slowly. I'm just realizing that my sister sabotaged my wedding thinking she was leaving me with nothing, when in reality, she has no idea who she's dealing with. Gannon finished with a determined gleam in his eye. As if on cue, Natalie entered with a tablet in hand. Madame Black has secured the Fairmont for today's events. I gasped. The Fairmont? But how? We own it, Gannon said simply. And that was just the beginning. What followed was a whirlwind of activity that transformed my modest wedding plans into something from a fairy tale. A renowned designer was called in with a selection of sample gowns from her upcoming collection, brought directly to me for fitting. The florist who'd been preparing my simple wildflower arrangements was paid handsomely to create elaborate displays using rare blooms flown in from 3 different countries. As noon approached, a local news van pulled up outside the house. What's that about? I asked Gannon, who'd just finished another call. The society editor at the Boston Globe is a family friend. They want to cover the wedding of the season. I said yes, thinking it might be nice for certain people in Paris to see what they missed. But if you're uncomfortable with it, I'll send them away immediately. I considered for a moment, thinking of Chloe's smug face as she boarded that plane, thinking she'd ruined my day. A small vindictive part of me that I rarely acknowledged rose to the surface. Let them stay, I decided. In fact, make sure they get really good footage. By 3 that afternoon, I hardly recognized the wedding that was taking shape. The Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a garden paradise that made my original venue look like a backyard picnic. Crystal chandeliers hung among artfully arranged greenery, White roses and orchids cascaded from custom-built structures that framed the aisle. The scent was intoxicating, a mixture of flowers and subtle perfume that made me feel like I'd stepped into another world. In a suite upstairs, I sat before a mirror while a celebrity stylist arranged my hair in soft waves. My original wedding dress, a simple lace A-line gown I'd found on sale, had been replaced by a breathtaking couture creation that fit as if it had been made for me. According to the designer, who had personally overseen the final adjustments, it actually had been in production for someone else, but was redirected to me with the promise of creating something even more spectacular for the original client. "The blacks are not people you say no to," she had whispered conspiratorially as she pinned the delicate fabric. Susan entered the suite carrying a velvet box. "Something borrowed," she said warmly, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond necklace that caught the light and scattered rainbows across the walls. "This was my grandmother's. I wore it at my wedding, and I would be honored if you'd wear it today." "Susan, I can't accept this. It's too valuable," I protested weakly, though the necklace was undeniably beautiful. "Nonsense. You're family now," she said firmly, fastening it around my neck. "Besides, it's only borrowed, though I suspect William and I will be purchasing something similar as a wedding gift." I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by her generosity. "Thank you for everything today. I don't know what I would have done if—" "Don't think about that now," she interrupted gently. "This is your day. Those who chose not to be here have made their decision. Focus on those who are here to celebrate you and Gannon." She was right, of course. Throughout the morning, friends had rallied around us, arriving early to offer support when they heard what had happened. My best friend from college, Sophia, stepped in as maid of honor. Gannon's grandfather, a distinguished-looking man in his 80s, offered to walk me down the aisle when he learned my father was absent. "It would be my privilege," he said with a formal bow that made me smile despite everything. Now, as the ceremony time approached, I took a final look in the mirror. The woman staring at me looked like a princess, radiant in ivory silk and diamonds. But more importantly, she looked happy. Despite the morning's betrayal, despite the absence of my birth family, joy had found its way back to my wedding day. "It's time," Susan announced, adjusting my veil one last time. In the hallway outside, a small camera crew from the local news station was waiting. The society reporter, a polished woman in her 40s, approached with the microphone. "Addison, you look stunning. I understand this wedding came together rather suddenly at the Fairmont. Can you tell our viewers a bit about your relationship with Gannon Black and this magnificent venue?" I smiled, remembering that this footage might eventually reach Paris. Sometimes life surprises you. When you find true love with someone who values and supports you completely, everything else falls into place. Gannon and I are blessed to have such wonderful friends and family celebrating with us today. I emphasized the word family slightly, thinking of Susan and William, who'd shown me more true family support in one day than my sister had in years. The walk down the aisle was surreal. The grand ballroom was filled with our original guests, plus what appeared to be half of Boston's social elite, all standing as the string quartet played. Gannon's grandfather patted my hand reassuringly as we began our procession. "You're doing beautifully, my dear. And between us, you're the most genuine bride this family has welcomed in generations." At the end of the aisle stood Gannon, his eyes fixed on me with such love and pride that everything else faded away. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about Chloe's betrayal or my parents' abandonment. I wasn't even thinking about the unexpected opulence surrounding us. I was thinking only of the man I was about to marry. The ceremony itself was brief, but deeply moving. We'd kept our original vows, simple promises of love and fidelity that felt even more powerful in the wake of the day's events. Gannon added a line that brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Addison, I promise to be your family, your safe harbor, your strongest advocate, and your most devoted companion, today and every day that follows."
When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the ballroom erupted in applause. As we walked back down the aisle together, I noticed several news cameras capturing the moment. Good, I thought with uncharacteristic satisfaction. Let them see how this turned out. The reception that followed was beyond anything I could have imagined. The Fairmont's renowned culinary team had created a menu featuring delicacies from around the world. A jazz band played during dinner, replaced by a popular local band for dancing. The cake, a 6-tier masterpiece decorated with sugar flowers that matched my bouquet, drew gasps when it was wheeled out. William Black gave a toast that managed to be both heartfelt and subtly pointed. To Gannon and Addison, who demonstrate that true character is revealed not in how one handles privilege, but in how one handles adversity. May you always find strength in one another and know that family is defined by love and loyalty, not merely by blood. Several guests who knew the situation glanced at each other meaningfully, but the majority of attendees simply raised their glasses in celebration.
Throughout the evening, I caught glimpses of the news crew filming. The society reporter seemed to be having the time of her life, interviewing guests about the surprise society wedding of the season. I overheard phrases like Harrington heir and exclusive footage as she spoke to her cameraman. Gannon noticed my distraction and pulled me aside into a quiet corner. "Are you okay with all this attention? I can have them removed if it's too much." I shook my head. "Actually, I'm enjoying it more than I expected. Is that terrible of me?" He laughed, kissing my forehead. "After what your sister did, I'd say it's perfectly understandable. Besides, this is genuinely news in certain circles. The notoriously private Gannon Black getting married would have made headlines regardless." "I had no idea I was marrying such a catch," I teased, feeling lighter than I had all day. "You're the catch," he replied seriously. "Everyone here can see that." And it seemed true. Throughout the evening, Gannon's extended family and business associates welcomed me warmly. Unlike the cold, judgmental reception I'd feared from wealthy elites, these people were genuine and kind, many sharing stories of how Gannon had spoken about me for months. "He said you were the most authentic person he ever met," his godmother confided. "In our world, that's the highest compliment possible." By midnight, as we prepared to leave for our wedding night at the Blacks' private suite, I felt something unexpected: gratitude. Not for the luxury or the spectacle, but for the revelation that sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the greatest blessings. Chloe had tried to ruin my wedding day, but instead, she'd inadvertently freed me from the constraints I'd placed on myself out of consideration for my family's finances and feelings. As Gannon and I waved goodbye to our guests, the news cameras captured one final shot of us together, radiant and triumphant. I couldn't help wondering if somewhere in Paris, my sister might soon be watching this very footage. The thought brought a smile to my face as we stepped into the waiting car. Our honeymoon was a dream I never knew I could have. Instead of the weekend getaway to a nearby beach town we'd originally planned, Gannon surprised me with 2 weeks at his family's private island in the Caribbean. The morning after our wedding, we boarded the Black private jet, still somewhat in shock from how dramatically our lives had changed in 24 hours. "Is this real?" I asked Gannon as we settled into buttery, soft leather seats, champagne already poured and waiting. "Yesterday morning, I woke up to an empty house and a cruel letter. Now I'm flying on a private jet to a private island as Addison Black." Gannon squeezed my hand. "It's very real, though I wish the circumstances that led to all this had been different." I nodded. The pain of my family's betrayal was still fresh despite the luxurious surroundings. "Have you checked the news coverage from last night? I'm curious what actually made it on air." Gannon pulled out his tablet and quickly found several links. Our wedding had indeed made the local news, with a surprisingly extensive segment featuring interviews with guests, footage of the ceremony, and particular focus on the fairy tale transformation of the venue.
The Society reporter had clearly been thrilled with her exclusive access to a Black family event. The sudden marriage of Gannon Black, heir to the Black international fortune, has taken Boston society by surprise, the reporter narrated over footage of us exchanging vows. Sources close to the family confirm this is not just a love match, but a refreshing departure from the typical society wedding, planned with minimal notice, yet executed with trademark Black perfection. The camera lingered on our first dance, my head resting on Gannon's shoulder as we swayed to the music, looking completely in love despite the day's earlier drama. It was a beautiful moment captured permanently for all to see. I allowed myself a small vindictive smile. Well, I guess that footage might travel.
3 days into our honeymoon, lounging on a pristine beach with the gentle Caribbean waves lapping at the shore, my prediction came true. My phone, which I had been checking periodically despite Gannon's playful protests about disconnecting, lit up with notifications. The first was a text from Chloe. "What the hell, Addison? You're married to Gannon Black, the hotel guy?" Attached was a screenshot of an international news site that had picked up our wedding story, featuring a photo of Gannon and me cutting our elaborate cake beneath the headline reading, "Black heir weds in surprise ceremony, fortune estimated at $3 billion. I showed the text to Gannon, who'd been reading beside me on an adjacent lounger. He raised an eyebrow. And so it begins. What are you going to say? I considered for a moment, then put the phone down without responding. Nothing yet. Letters due for a while. Over the next few hours, more messages arrived. From my mother. "Addison, we just saw the news. There must be some confusion. Please call us when you can." From my father. "Sweetheart, we're trying to understand what happened. The wedding we saw on the news doesn't look like what you were planning. Call us." And from Chloe, a barrage of increasingly desperate texts. "Did you seriously hide that you were dating a billionaire? Why didn't you tell us who he really was? Oh my God, the Blacks own like half of downtown Boston. Call me back." I showed each message to Gannon, who alternated between anger at my family's audacity and amusement at their obvious panic. They're realizing what they grew away. Not just a wedding, but connections to one of the most influential families in the country. "I never told them about your background because it wasn't relevant to why I was marrying you. And I guess I was right to keep it private, given how they've behaved." I continued to monitor social media as the days passed. Chloe, who'd been posting glamorous selfies from Paris with captions like, "Living my best life while some people settle for less," had gone conspicuously silent after the news broke. My parents' accounts showed they were still in Paris, but had stopped posting as well. A week into our honeymoon, a different kind of message arrived. It was from my college roommate, Jennifer, who'd attended our wedding. "Hey, just thought you should know your sister's having some kind of meltdown on Instagram. She posted a long rant about being deceived and then deleted it, but people took screenshots. It's getting around. Hope you're having an amazing honeymoon and ignoring all this drama. Love you both." Sure enough, a quick search revealed Chloe had posted a rambling, defensive statement attempting to explain why she had had to miss her sister's wedding due to prior commitments, and claiming she had no idea about the Black connection. The internet had responded with predictable viciousness, with strangers calling her everything from the worst sister ever to social climbing trash who missed her chance. I felt a complex mixture of emotions. On one hand, seeing Chloe face consequences for her actions satisfied something deep and wounded inside me. On the other, watching my sister being publicly humiliated didn't bring the closure I had hoped for. "I think I need to understand why they did it," I told Gannon, as we discussed the situation over dinner on our private terrace. Gannon nodded thoughtfully. "From what you've told me about Chloe, I suspect she manipulated your parents somehow. They've never seemed malicious, just maybe too willing to keep peace in the family." That night, I drafted a brief text to my father, the parent I'd always been closer to. "I need to know exactly what Chloe told you to convince you to abandon me on my wedding day." His response came hours later, likely delayed by the time difference.
She said Gannon was planning to leave you at the altar, that his friends told her he had cold feet and was going to humiliate you. She said we should get you away too, but when we suggested postponing the wedding, she convinced us you wouldn't listen, said you should remove ourselves so you could save face when he didn't show up. I'm so sorry, Addison. We were trying to protect you from pain. I stared at the message, pieces finally clicking into place. She lied to them, I told Gannon, showing him the text. She completely fabricated a story about you planning to leave me, and they believed her without even talking to you. Gannon's voice held disbelief and lingering anger. They've always had a blind spot with Chloe. I admitted, she's the baby, the one who struggles more. They believe her when she says she needs something.
The truth hurt, but it also freed me. My parents hadn't abandoned me out of malice, but out of misguided protection, manipulated by Chloe's lies. It didn't excuse their actions. They should have talked to me directly, but it made more sense than them simply choosing a Paris trip over my happiness. As for Chloe, her motives were now crystal clear. She'd orchestrated the entire situation out of jealousy, never imagining it would backfire so spectacularly. In her worldview, I was the plain, practical sister who didn't deserve a grand romance or a beautiful wedding. She couldn't allow me to have something she didn't, even if it meant destroying one of the most important days of my life. By the end of our honeymoon, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't respond to any of their messages yet. I needed time and space to process everything without their excuses or apologies clouding my judgment. Gannon supported me completely, assuring me there was no rush to resolve the family drama. "Take all the time you need," he said as we prepared to leave our island paradise. "They're the ones who should be waiting for your forgiveness, not the other way around." Our return to Boston brought another surprise. While we were away, William and Susan had arranged for the purchase and renovation of a beautiful brownstone in Back Bay as our wedding gift. The 4-bedroom home had been completely furnished with an artful blend of antiques and contemporary pieces that somehow perfectly captured both Gannon's refined taste and my more eclectic style. "We can't accept this," I protested when they first showed us the property, overwhelmed by the magnitude of such a gift. "Of course you can," William replied matter-of-factly. "Gannon's trust fund would have purchased something similar anyway. Consider this saving you both the hassle of house hunting." Susan squeezed my hand, sensing my discomfort. "Think of it as us welcoming you properly to the family. We're so happy Gannon found you." Throughout those first months, messages from my family continued to arrive with increasing frequency and desperation. My parents called daily, leaving voicemails that evolved from confused to apologetic to deeply remorseful. Chloe alternated between defensive justifications and tearful pleas for forgiveness. I saved them all, but responded to none. 2 months after the wedding, I finally felt ready to address the situation. With Gannon's encouragement and my therapist's guidance, I arranged to meet my family at a neutral location, a private dining room at a downtown restaurant. They arrived together, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what they'd done. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying. My father couldn't seem to look directly at me. And Chloe, usually so confident and polished, appeared almost fragile, her customary bravado nowhere to be seen. "Thank you for meeting us," my father began, awkwardly, once we were seated. "We know we don't deserve—" "Before we start," I interrupted calmly, "I want to establish something. I'm here to express my feelings and potentially begin a healing process, not to listen to excuses. What you did hurt me deeply, and acknowledging that harm is the only way forward." They nodded, chastened by my directness. "I've had a lot of time to think about what happened and why. Dad, I received your text explaining what Chloe told you. While I understand you thought you were protecting me, what hurts most is that you didn't talk to me directly. You didn't verify what she was saying or give me any agency in the situation." My father nodded, eyes downcast. "We were wrong, completely wrong.
There's no excuse for not coming to you first. I turned to my mother. Mom, you've always taught me about family loyalty. Yet you left me alone on what should have been one of the most important days of my life. How do you reconcile that? She wiped away tears. I can't. I was weak and foolish. I let Chloe convince me that leaving quietly was kinder than watching you be humiliated. I should have known better. Finally, I faced my sister. And you, Chloe, you deliberately lied to our parents to sabotage my wedding. Why? What did you possibly hope to gain? Chloe's composure finally broke. I was jealous, okay? You've always been the good one, the smart one, the one who does everything right. Then you were getting married before me, and even though your wedding was going to be small, you were still so happy. I couldn't stand it. So you tried to ruin it, I stated flatly. I didn't know who Gannon really was, she admitted miserably. I thought I was leaving you with nothing. Then I saw the news coverage and realized what I'd done, what I'd cost us all.
Her words hung in the air, the naked self-interest finally exposed. It wasn't just about hurting me, it was about what connections to the Black family could have meant for her. That's the problem, I said quietly. You're still thinking about what you lost in terms of status and connections, not about the pain you caused or the relationship you damaged. The conversation continued for hours. There were tears, accusations, apologies, and painful truths. I learned that Chloe had been systematically sabotaging wedding preparations for weeks before the final betrayal. I discovered my parents had used their entire savings for the Paris trip, believing Chloe's assurance that Gannon wouldn't show up anyway. We came back early when we saw the news, my mother explained. We couldn't believe what we'd done. The worst part was seeing how happy you looked, my father added, and knowing we should have been there. By the end of the evening, we'd reached a fragile understanding. I wasn't ready to fully forgive them, but I was willing to begin rebuilding with my parents. Chloe was a different story. Her betrayal ran deeper, was more calculated, and would take much longer to address. I need time, I told her as we prepared to leave. I can't just go back to being sisters as if nothing happened. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. In the months that followed, I maintained limited contact with my parents, gradually increasing our interactions as trust slowly rebuilt. They met Gannon's family properly and formed their own relationships independent of me. William and Susan, demonstrating remarkable graciousness, never mentioned the wedding day abandonment and treated my parents with unfailing politeness. As for Chloe, our path to reconciliation was much longer and more complex. After several false starts where her apology seemed more focused on what she'd lost than the harm she'd caused, she eventually began therapy herself. 6 months later, she sent me a letter that finally felt authentic, acknowledging her jealousy, competitiveness, and the deep insecurity that drove her behavior. I've always defined myself in opposition to you. If you were the responsible one, I had to be the fun one. If you were practical, I had to be adventurous. I never figured out who I am on my own terms, and that emptiness made me cruel. I'm working on that now. And while I don't expect forgiveness, I want you to know I genuinely regret what I did. That letter marked a turning point. While we'd never had the simple sister relationship I'd once hoped for, we began building something new. Something more honest and less burdened by childhood patterns. A year after our wedding, Gannon and I hosted a vow renewal ceremony. This time, my father walks me down the aisle. My mother helped plan certain aspects of the celebration. Chloe attended as a guest, not as part of the wedding party, a boundary she respected without complaint. The experience taught me profound lessons about family, forgiveness, and authenticity. Blood ties are powerful, but not all determining. Sometimes the family we choose, like Gannon and his parents, can provide the unconditional support our birth family cannot. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing boundaries or pretending harm never occurred. And most importantly, living authentically rather than competitively brings the greatest peace. Now, 2 years into my marriage, I've found my footing in this new life. I've expanded my work in the art world using some of the Black resources to establish a foundation supporting emerging artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. Gannon and I have maintained our core values despite the privilege that surrounds us. And I've learned to appreciate the unexpected gifts that came from that painful wedding morning. Clarity about who truly supports me, freedom from unhealthy family dynamics, and the strength that comes from facing betrayal and choosing healing over bitterness. Have you ever experienced the betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life, or found yourself having to set boundaries with family members who hurt you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences that remind us all but even our darkest moments can lead to unexpected light. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is every bit as important as the one we're born into.